Cool. So this week we're starting a new series. It's called Real Friends. For those of you who, right? For those of you who don't know who I am, I'm Sydney. I'm the intern with Brant. And so I'm going to kick off this sermon series called Real Friends, and it's all about how do you find real friends? That friend that you can just tell anything to, those real friends that you're really close to. What does the Bible have to say about friendships? How do we have friends like that? Because I don't know about you guys, it can be kind of hard to find real friends in middle school. It's not as easy as when you were in elementary school, when your mom just arranged a play date and you shared a good juice box and you were just tight from then out, right? It's not quite that simple anymore. I know, miss those days. I think my first friend, I chose my first friend because she had a strawberry shortcake shirt on, and I thought that's the friend that I want to have, and it was just that simple, right? But the Bible has a lot of good advice to give us about how do we navigate friendships now that things are maybe a little bit more difficult that you're in middle school. So I have a question for you guys. How many of you guys have met somebody who's just super joyful all of the time? It's impossible to be sad around that person. You guys know who I'm talking about? They just love life. How many of you guys raise of hands? Now keep your hands raised if that's a person that you want to be around, right? So that sounds like a pretty awesome person, that person that's super joyful all of the time. But then you think about the other person who maybe, like, whenever you're around them, they're complaining about somebody else. They're just having a really hard time at life. They're always negative, always talking bad about something. Just seems like they're just having a really hard time. Now, how many of you guys want to be around that person all of the time, right? I don't know. I don't believe you. Right? So you want to have that person be around the person that's super joyful, that's having a great time, that shows all of the fruits of the Spirit. Do you remember the fruits of the Spirit that we talked about the last 3 weeks? Love, joy, peace, patience, goodness, kindness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control, right? All of those things are actually super cool in friends, that there's something about those fruits of the Spirit. When somebody's just super joyful, that they're super peaceful, that they just have a great time, they just enjoy life, and they're living in those fruits, that's somebody that you actually want to be around. Here's the point. When looking for friends, it's not always just about desperately looking for somebody, trying to get into an inner circle. Part of the thing about finding good friends is being the friend that you want to have. Right? Thank you. So if you are that friend, if you're that super joyful person that's living in all of the fruits of the Spirit, that you are firm in your identity in the Lord, then that's a person people are going to want to hang out around you. All of you guys said you want to hang out around this person, the person that's super joyful, that just is loving life and is living in the fruits of the Spirit. People want to be around that. So be the friend that you want to have, and you'll see things start to come in alignment from that. Going forward, I think one of the best places to figure out how do we friend, how do you be a real friend, and how do you look for real friends is looking at the life of Jesus. So we're going to go to Luke 6 if you have your Bibles. By the way, if you need note paper, I can pause what I'm saying right now. Go ahead and go back and get note paper, pens, Bibles if you need it. And we're going to jump in at Luke 6 and look at the life of Jesus, how he was a friend. What example did he set for friendships? So here in Luke, I don't know if most of you guys have probably heard of Jesus and like his story, right? He had the 12 disciples, which were his closest friends. They did everything together. Everywhere that Jesus went, his disciples went with him, and they were always asking Jesus questions. Jesus was giving them like advice, and they were always together and supporting one another. And one of Jesus's 12 disciples is named Luke, and that's the person that is writing this here. And Luke 6:31 is where we're going to go, and Luke asks this question, and Jesus, one of the great pieces of advice that Jesus gives, Luke 6:31, he says that you are to do to others as you would like them to do to you. In other words, be the friend that you want to have. Do to others as you would like them to do to you. And that's a good question that you can ask yourself throughout your life and the things that you're doing. Do to others as you would like them to do. So as you're posting on social media, are you posting something that you would want somebody to post about you? As you're in a classroom and you're talking about people and you're having conversations, are you talking about people in the way that you would want them to talk about you? Are you saying good things, life-giving things? Even when you're at home with your siblings, if maybe you really want your siblings to help you out with chores, you really want them to do these things for you, to hang out with you, maybe try helping them with chores every now and again. Maybe try having conversations with them and helping them. In everything that you do, when you find yourself saying, I really wish that my sister, that my friend, that this person at school would do this for me, you can take that and begin to do that for other people. Do to other people what you would like them to do to you. In every single context of your life, when you're discontent, when you want something from somebody, you can just begin to do that for other people, and you'll find that you will actually find a lot more joy as you do that for others. There's another verse in the Bible that says this a different way that I want to turn to and really kind of camp out here. It's in Colossians. I know that's a shorter book in the Bible. It's a little farther. If you're turning there, you can kind of see it's maybe halfway through the New Testament here. We're going to go to Colossians chapter 3, and verse 12. Same idea. It puts it this way. It says, therefore, as God's chosen ones, holy and dearly loved, put on compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Put on the fruits of the Spirit. Rely on the Lord, bearing with one another, which means that you are supporting your people around you when they're struggling, that you are not just looking for your own interest, but when people need you, that you're bearing with them, you're helping them, and forgiving one another if anyone has a grievance against another, just as the Lord has forgiven you, so you are also to forgive. Here's a side note. You cannot forgive anybody more than God's already forgiven you. You cannot show more mercy than God has already shown you. And so how awful would it be? I know we try to make these excuses of, but they just hurt me so many times. I'm not going to forgive them. They're not worth me being kind to anymore. What would you say, how awful would that be if God said that about us, right? That we can never outgive God, we can never forgive more. So as we're living by the Lord, that we can continue to forgive through him because God has forgiven us. And it says, above all, put on love, which is the perfect bond of unity, and let the peace of Christ, to which you were also called in one body, rule your hearts, and be thankful. So basically what God says is, don't worry about what other people are giving to you. Don't worry about what your friends can give you. Don't worry about what other people can give you. Instead, just give completely self-sacrificially everything that you have to other people. That everything that you could want from other people, give to others, and that's a way to find life. And I get it. That sounds really hard. Right? You're just like, love all of the time, give everything to people, like really everything that I could want from other people, give that to them. Yes. And it sounds hard because it's actually not possible for you to do on your own. That the whole point of this chapter here, if you go back to the section before the one I just read, it talks about the gospel. It says that you once were living selfishly. You once lived in a way where you were just doing everything for yourself, that you were just totally living in the world. But when you received Jesus, it says that you died to that old person. That person that you were that was super selfish before that you found Christ and started living for him, that person's gone, and you're able to live in new freedom, in new life, that God makes you new, that God gives you the righteousness of Christ that you can live from. Just like we talked about for the past 3 weeks, all of the fruits of the Spirit. Who remembers how you can live in the fruits of the Spirit? How do you have the love, joy, peace, patience, all of those things? How do you get those? Lakota. Right? And who? Right, for sure. And it's a fruit of the? Right. And so it's not something you muster up on your own. You can never love people the way God tells us to love on your own, in your own strength. It's a fruit of the Spirit that as you rely on the Lord, as you're content in that relationship with God, you're able to pour out those fruits of the Spirit. It's a fruit of God living within you. That the more that you rely on God, the more you're able to give out, and the more you're able to be that person that I talked about earlier that's just super joyful that everyone wants to be around. That only happens when you're relying on God at the center of your life, and you're letting him live through you. That is how you become that person, and that you become new. Yeah. So here's the point. You become the friend that you want to have, and that happens by relying on God, by being content in your relationship with God. And that actually you don't need to receive anything from any of your friends, that you don't need to come from a place of discontentment, because God says that every good thing is in him. Everything that you could ever want from any of your friends, any of the people around you, God already has in abundance. God already has every good thing in abundance for you if you would just turn to him. He says that, so if from one of your friends, say you really want to just be loved by somebody. You're really struggling, you feel really lonely, and you just want to feel loved by somebody. God already says that he has perfect love for you, and that you already have that in abundance. All the fruits of the Spirit you have in abundance if you would just turn to God and find your contentment and your joy in that. And the really cool thing is, as you're fully content in God and you're asking him to give you everything, then you're able to see all of the things that your friends give you as a blessing. You're not coming from a place of discontentment where they're filling some need in you, that you can actually receive the fullness of joy and the blessing that they're giving in loving you and being your friend when you're fully content in the Lord first. I went through a season of this when I was living in New York City. God was really impressing this on me. He says, 2 greatest commandments. Love the Lord your God with all of your heart, mind, soul, strength, and from that, love other people. And that Jesus came not to be served, but to serve, and says to do as I did. And God was just impressed on me that the opposite of love is selfishness. The opposite of what God calls us to do is selfishness. And so we're called to be completely selfless in the things that we're doing in our friendships. And I really struggled with that for a while. I was like, God, really? Like, all the time? And I had this one friendship, and it was awesome, and it was great. But he really struggled to remember to be a friend towards me, and I was just giving and giving and giving. And it was actually so good. Like, I found I would go through that season where I would be really struggling with something. For example, one of my friends tried to commit suicide at that point in time, and I was just like, God, I really feel like I need a friend right now, but I know I don't actually need a friend, I need you. Show me how you're enough for this. And you can ask God when you're struggling, like, how are you enough for this? How do I find this good thing that I really want in my friend in you first? And he'll show you. God isn't just this distant person. I think sometimes we live like he's just this distant figure off in space somewhere that doesn't actually care about your day-to-day life, and he does. Every detail of your life, God actually cares, and you can invite him into that. And Jesus says he's the friend that sticks closer than a brother. Even if you had the greatest friends in the entire world that were always there for you, just amazing, amazing friends, the best person you could ever think of, at some point they're going to fall short. At some point, they're not going to love you in the way that you want to be loved. They're going to be lacking in some capacity. But you have Jesus, who is the friend that sticks closer than a brother. And you can rely on Jesus. He is that friend that you've always wanted to have. And he actually says that he desires for you to be in a relationship. So as you're living this out, as you're doing the things the Bible tells you to do, I believe God has good friendships for you in that as you're relying on him. He desires for you to be in community. There's lots of things that talk about that. So it's not like God's asking to take anything from you. He has good friends for you, but the only way that those friends can be truly good friends and you're not coming from a place of lacking is if you're relying on Jesus first and foremost, on that relationship. I promise you guys can test me on this. Really press into that relationship with God and watch how everything just falls into place, and your life really does get so much better. So here's the point of what I'm saying. Be the friend that you want to have. Seek ways that you can, all the things that you're wanting from your friends, how can you give that to other people? And that's possible because of your relationship with God. So be the friend that you want to have and ask yourself how you can begin to rely on God to do that. So we're going to head off to small groups here in a second. And here's the question that I want you guys to be thinking about. What kind of friend are you? And how can you start living more like Jesus, the way that Jesus was a friend in your life? What friend are you? How can you start moving in the direction of being more like Jesus in your friendships? And with that, I'm going to pray and we'll break off to small groups. You want to bow your heads with me? Dear God, I just thank you just for your goodness and for everything that you've given us, Lord. I pray that you would help us to see you as the friend that sticks closer than a brother, Lord, that you would just reveal yourself to us in the midst of hard things when we're struggling with friendships, God. I pray that you would just be speaking in small groups and convicting us on ways that we can be better friends and better rely on you in the midst of that, God. I thank you that you have only good things for us, Lord. It's in your name that I pray. Amen.